Good evening, and welcome to another installment of Stories from the Internet, where I bring you the creepiest real-life stories from all over. For a continual supply of creepiness, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss a future episode. Sit back, hit the lights, and let's begin. In 1472, a book simply entitled Commedia was published. Today we know this book as The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, perhaps one of the greatest works of literature in history. It details Dante's journey through hell, Inferno, Purgatory, Purgatorio, and finally heaven, in Paradiso. While many scholars say that this is a work of fiction and is a reflection of philosophy and theology of the time it was written, there are those that believe it is a true account of a mortal entering the worlds of the afterlife. Is such a thing even possible? Well, in today's story, we meet a person who has perhaps had a similar experience. Have a listen and decide for yourself. Has anyone else had a dream that lasted for months or even years, only to wake up to find the past few years were all a dream? I don't mean dreams with time skips, but actually experiencing slow 24-hour days where your life continues only for you to wake up one day to find the last few years, or months, or whatever, was all a dream. I saw another post about this. Lots of people assumed it was BS, but many other Redditors reported having experienced this too. I have myself, and since the thread discussing this is a year old, I figured I'd make a new one. The old thread about this was an Ask Reddit thread, and they don't allow text in the body, so this seemed like it might be a good alternative subreddit for this, since dream subreddits seem empty. Everyone else I've read about had basically normal, happy lives in their dreams, often marrying and having kids, not unlike that episode of Star Trek, where Picard lives an entirely imaginary lifetime before waking up back on his ship. Mine is different and much darker and less normal than others I have read, but I will share it anyhow below. It is very long, so don't feel compelled to read if you don't want to. This is for sharing these experiences, not focusing on mine. Here goes. I'm copying this from a PM I sent another Redditor who experienced this, and this dream happened more than 5 years ago now. I was driving home one night via the back way, through the side roads. I normally took the interstate, but I always used these back roads if they were doing road work on the interstate, or if the normal road to the interstate was temporarily shut down by cops. Both happened a lot at the time, and not knowing the area well, I stuck to one of the two routes I knew. It was also always dark when I left work, just like the dream. It was raining, my wipers were going. I was approaching the sign at this pretty desolate section of the trip that I always used as a marker for when it was time to either turn off the back road and onto the last bit of the interstate before my exit, or continue taking more confusing back roads with lots of turns that I always got confused with, to skip the interstate entirely. My car didn't turn left when I turned the wheel, but kept going, hydroplaning straight at the slight angle it had been in, right off the road and over the embankment where the river is. My view is now back somewhere above the road, looking straight towards a spot where I had just driven off the road. I cannot see my car or anything else, as from the road you can only see bushes and grass. Since the slope downhill to the river is too close and steep to see from the road, it is no longer raining, and I feel a pit in my stomach. Like you feel those first few seconds after being told unexpectedly a grandparent or some other loved one has passed before you can process it. It is no longer raining. Then suddenly I forget all of this, and I'm 3 towns away in the dark living room of my parents' house. Time has passed. It feels like it's about 5 a.m. because it's still dark outside, but my stepfather has just woken up and walked down the hall to the living room, past me, over to the kitchen to start a pot of coffee. Sat down in his chair and turned on his computer. He's pulling out a cigarette waiting for the PC to boot up, like he always does. He asks aloud, "Where the hell is my damn lighter?" As he looks around his desk. I tell him I don't know, but he doesn't respond to me. A minute or so passes, and he makes some small remark while looking at his computer, something like a grumpy, "More rain Tuesday." I say it was raining just now. He sips his coffee, and he keeps looking at his computer. And I remember my drive. First me looking from the road at where I drove off, and then I remembered what happened before that, me driving off in the rain. I start telling him I messed up, and that I'd been driving and it was raining. He's just drinking his coffee and making his normal just woke up grunts that he makes when reading the news or acknowledging he's listening to something this early. Not a morning guy. I feel so much fear and guilt. There is now a sound of a car pulling into the driveway, and I just know it's the cops here about my wreck, as I seem to on some level realise what has happened on some deeper level, but have not put the pieces together consciously yet. As expected with someone pulling in unexpected this early, my stepfather had a look of confusion, concern go across his face, and stood up and opened the door. 2 cops are getting out of their car, and my stepfather slips on his house shoes and walks out to meet them. They talk, and I cannot hear them, but I know they must be there to tell them about my accident. I realise I am dead. When he comes back inside, he's upset. I say, "I'm sorry. They're here about me, aren't they?" He doesn't even look at me and goes straight to the second brighter dining room light he keeps off this early and turns it on. Dining room, kitchen isn't separated from the living room, and at night and early in the morning he only turns on the small dim light above the sink. He grabs his coffee and a cigarette from his desk and sits on one of the hard dinner table chairs, not normal, and immediately lights another cigarette, despite his last one still only half burnt, sitting on the ashtray. He sighs and looks down. How am I going to tell Sam? My mum. I try saying that I'm sorry, that I didn't mean to wreck, and that it was raining. And as I'm saying this, he starts speaking, even as I am still talking, but at his quiet morning voice, unlike when he normally interrupts and talks over me. This is going to kill her. Then, louder, with almost some anger but also pity. I told him he was going to get himself killed. He always said I didn't pay enough attention driving, and was always saying that one day I would end up killing someone not paying attention. I suddenly feel major fear, considering for the first time the possibility that he cannot hear me. I'm afraid, but push the fear away, reassuring myself that he was just speaking to me. I tried to remember what we were talking about before the cops, but realise he has been talking but hasn't really been responding back to anything I've said. He, my mum, my sister, we all say certain thoughts and gripes aloud. Not sure if we got it from him or it's just an Appalachian thing. We have pretty unique culture. I am scared and I start asking if he can hear me. He doesn't respond. I'm panicking. I am closer, right in front of his face, and he isn't acknowledging me at all. I hadn't realised it yet, but I hadn't seen my arms or any part of my body out of my peripheral view since I was in the car. It's obvious now that no one can hear me, and I'm realising that fully what I already knew deep down. I was dead. I scream and yell that I am there, begging him to hear me. I continue doing this until he goes and wakes my mum up, has her sit down and brings her coffee, and holds her as he finally tells her what has happened. I cannot stand seeing her face break and hearing her cry, saying I never should have moved out, and asking my stepfather why I would be driving in the rain, saying it had to be a mistake. I couldn't be dead. Then I cannot hear her anymore as I am screaming so loud that I'm there and it's okay. Then just, I'm here. I'm here, Mum. Over and over. I feel a great passage of time, and for maybe a split second, I appear to be inside the funeral home my grandfather had his funeral, and it's filled with people, but although I am too far back to see the deceased, I can tell it's not the same people who were at his funeral. I'm not there for more than a second when another jump happens, my last jump, and I am back at my family home again, but no one is home. I don't time skip or teleport again. When my family comes home, they still cannot hear me, and some days must have passed in my final jump, as no one is dressed for my funeral or talking about me at that moment. I spent a few weeks there just watching them, and eventually give up trying to make them hear me. After a few weeks, I leave. I try talking to neighbours and random people, but no one knows I'm there. I finally just leave town, following the interstate slowly. I go to other towns and just watch, as it's all I can do. So afraid and sad and guilty and lonely. I spend more than a year with no one to talk to. An entire year with nothing but grief and fear and guilt. I don't check out hot girls changing or sneak into military bases or any of that stuff you would think about doing if invisible, because I don't feel my body, just coldness. And I don't feel happiness or hope or arousal or pain or hunger, only constant fear, loneliness, guilt, and sometimes dread. Nearly 2 years in, I visit a city. It's daylight and morning and cold, as it always is now. And it's been more than a year since I quit talking at all. Hardly thought anymore. Just would wander aimlessly, or just stay in one spot and just watch the trees, or the clouds, or people crossing a busy intersection. Somewhere near Boston or New Hampshire, not sure, as I didn't really pay attention to that sort of thing anymore, and would just start moving to try and ignore all the regular flashes of memory, paused still memories of the crash, and events shortly after. I would stop moving when they overwhelmed me, or start moving for the same reason. But here I was, in this city I had just arrived at, when I realised someone else like me was here. I couldn't see her, we couldn't talk to each other, but I could sense her. I could see almost like a short clip from one instance in her life, of her smiling on a brighter, less cloudy day, next to a boyfriend or father whose face I could not see. I could feel her loneliness and fear too. I could feel that she could feel me as well, and that she too had been here long enough to not feel much more than deflated than I did at finally finding another and not being able to really talk or see each other. But we could communicate without sight or sound. I felt her questions, her fears, all of her feelings. I felt her wanting to ask me if we were ghosts, despite being able to sense that she had no doubt that she was, and had for years. I wanted to tell her that I didn't know, and could feel that she understood this. We didn't communicate in words after this, as we could communicate more accurately and precisely with far greater detail than any verbal or written language ever could, with pure feeling, like instant understanding of what we wanted to share without words, pictures, or sounds. It's hard to describe, and I don't know how to put it into words. I could understand whatever idea she wanted to express, whether it was feelings or questions, without words. We thought a bit about our purpose, if maybe we had missed the light to the other side, or if there were others like us, but neither of us had any answers. She had never left her city after dying. She tried, like me, to not think about how she died, or her life before, because it only intensified the fear, loneliness, and dread. I didn't feel guilt from her like I felt, more a bitterness in the spot I had my fear. After 2 days, the temporary distraction was no longer stronger than our loneliness and fear, and we were no longer communicating, each back to our own misery once more. I knew she had decided she wanted to be alone again. At the time, she wanted to be alone forever. And although I too felt like disappearing into a forest or stretch of rural highway, I was still surprisingly a little sad when I felt her no longer there a few hours later. I stayed at that same spot for some time, not long, maybe a few more weeks, and before I suddenly woke up. It had been 12 hours, and I was 2 hours late for work, again. I did not forget this one though. I was less happy to be alive than I was some other new feeling that I don't know how to describe. That I don't think we have a word for it. But it was a feeling closer to sadness than happy. But not quite a negative, not bittersweet feeling. It did not rain that night, nor was the construction preventing me from taking the interstate home. But the next night was one of the construction nights. They had been doing nighttime construction for months, since it's when there's less traffic to slow down. And it did start to rain, and I told the story to a co-worker, who only joked about me probably crashing tonight, but didn't seem to take the dream as seriously as I had. I took the back roads back anyways because the rain was only sprinkling, and not the heavy rain from my dream. And despite being stricken with fear as it picked up during the drive, for some reason I didn't turn around, but I just kept going. I felt such dread when I got to the sign, and slowed to almost a stop as I got closer to it. Enough for a car to have to slam its brakes behind me and honk angrily at me before illegally passing me. No pass section. There were more cars behind that one, and I was embarrassed and sped up to normal, making the turn left with no issues. That is my experience. Edit. I typed this on my tiny phone with strong autocorrect and autofinish, and some words might be messed up or changed entirely. I fixed what I could, but if she word or sentence makes no sense, just guess as best you can based on context. TLDR, I got myself killed in a car accident after I could still see and think but couldn't feel or see my body, but always felt cold. No one could see or hear me. I spent 2 years wandering aimlessly, filled with nothing but sadness and fear until I suddenly woke up, alive again, as if it had all been a dream. As the poster suggested, I did alter a few words to what I think it should have been. Might not be 100% correct though. I am by no means an expert on the afterlife or dreams, but I'm pretty confident that this sort of experience isn't one I would wish on anyone. Incidentally, if you haven't read Dante's Divine Comedy, I highly recommend it. It's free on most ebook sites. If the language in it is too heavy for you, I would recommend reading Inferno by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Not a sponsorship or anything, I just really love that book. It is so well done. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video. You can follow me on most social media and chat with me over at the Opinionated Outcast Discord server. If you really like what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon for as little as $2 a month, where there are rewards, sneak peeks, and other Patreon-only exclusives. All links are in the description below. Thank you, and remember, it's always scarier when it's real. Good night.